Baker Mayfield. He reminds me of a shorter version of Brett Favre. He can throw it. He's very confident. He's not afraid whatsoever.
Another guy that isn't getting nearly as much attention as I believe he should be is Florida International receiver T.Y. Hilton. 6 returns over his career, combining kick and punt returns for touchdowns.
He has the mindset, and he has the intelligence, and he understands the offense to a T. Kirk's our quarterback. We could have done a deal right then and got it for long term and been a slam dunk.
Sam is a good football player. The problem is he's not a great football player, and we're bringing so much attention to a guy that, frankly, is a day 3 prospect.
And now, the Instinctive Scouting Podcast, featuring 2-time NFL General Manager Scot McCloughan and NFLDraftScout.com Senior Analyst Rob Rang.
Hi, and welcome to the Instinctive Scouting Podcast, starring 2-time NFL General Manager Scot McCloughan and myself, Rob Rang, Senior Analyst for NFLDraftScout.com. Scott, we got a lot of topics to cover this week, and with the holiday week, everybody's going to be watching a lot of football, so let's just jump right into it with the game that you and I and basically probably every football-loving person watched last night on Monday Night Football. And that would be my question is, did we see a Super Bowl preview last night between the LA Rams and the Kansas City Chiefs? What do you think?
There's a chance. There's definitely a chance. I think, there's a handful of teams that can get there. I think the Saints are playing really, really well. And that quarterback's not going to change. The only way they're going to have trouble is if he gets hurt. That's the only way. But you know what? With the Rams, and they got weapons. They got a young quarterback that's playing really well. KC, of course, has got a young quarterback, and he's got weapons. They're playing well. They're 2 legit teams. There's no doubt about it. They're definitely in the mix. Definitely.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think if they were in the mix, that the very first team that I thought of as well was the New Orleans Saints. They just seem like they're playing so incredibly well right now on both sides of the ball. Not only offense, but defense as well. I mean, I have a hard time imagining a team being able to put 50 on that Saints defense, just given how well they play together.
No. I'm telling you, it's we got a lot of football still left, but it's last night we saw 2 good offenses put up a lot of points, which I personally don't like because I like defense, but that's the way the game's changed, and that's the way the officials are calling it.
Yep.
And if the commissioner wants points, he's getting points, but I think the old school fans would like to see a 10-7 game, a dogfight. The new generation of fans want to see a shootout.
Yep.
And they saw one last night.
No, they certainly did. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, just the numbers that, especially Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff to a lesser extent put up. But, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think that some of those old school fans who like a little bit more traditional kind of brawling style of football are going to miss defense. And, but there's this fantasy football revolution out there. And I can't tell you, I mean, just talking to people, how many people were so excited that maybe don't even watch a typical Monday night game, but tuned in this week just because their fantasy football quarterback, scored 60 points or whatever the case might be. But I do have to give, some, at least acknowledge that there was a fair amount of defense being played last night. There wasn't a lot of punts, that's for sure. But, there was 3 different defensive touchdowns, and, there was that the Chiefs had 5 sacks, the Rams had 3 sacks, and, forced 5 turnovers. Now, they were all on Patrick Mahomes. I mean, three interceptions he threw and then 2 fumbles. So that's, because I agree with you. I mean, you and I have had enough conversations about football that we're both kind of like-minded that way. We want to see some defense. We want to see some, stop them on 4th down, that kind of thing. But, 3 defensive touchdowns is pretty exciting as well. And that was one of the things I kind of wanted to, before we shift gears a little bit here, is just kind of acknowledge that some of the playmakers on the defensive side of the ball that came through. Obviously Aaron Donald, but Chris Jones for Kansas City now 7 consecutive games that he has a sack. I mean, that's pretty impressive stuff there for the Kansas City Chiefs as well. Was there any defensive players or offensive players that really jumped out to you that maybe surprised you, other than probably the quarterbacks last night?
No, not really. The thing that is happening, in my personal opinion, which I could be completely wrong with the fans out there, is the fact that it's changing to a college game. Mm-hmm. And when you throw the ball that many times, there's going to be sacks and there's going to be forced fumbles. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing that stood out to me is you're going to get picks, you're going to get forced fumbles on the quarterback because you're dropping back so many times. Okay. I respect, the teams like what Dallas is doing, running the football, controlling the clock. That way you don't have these big points, and I'm fine with offense. I'm fine with, a team wins, but it's just, I think it's changed so much, which I can understand why, because these quarterbacks, especially with Goff and especially with, with whoever young quarterbacks out there, that they're tailoring to what they did in high school and college.
Yep.
And that's smart. That's what a good coach does. He puts them in the position to be successful. But the game's changing, and I don't like it, but I'm cool with it. But I want to see tough, hard-nosed defenses. I want to see offenses pound the ball between the tackles and get downhill. But it's changed, and it's gonna keep changing for a while.
No, you're right. I mean, it's a perfect segue because one of the things I really want to talk about, and it's something that Booger McFarland made mention of on the the Monday Night Football broadcast, was just this perception that Jared Goff was, some people were calling him already a bust. I mean, after only just 1 year with Jeff Fisher and the offensive coaches that he had, and then of course Sean McVay comes in there, and and Jared Goff has just absolutely exploded. And I think that McVay is getting a lot of credit, and I think he certainly deserves it. But I also think that Jared Goff deserves some credit as well. But at the same time, it kind of goes back to the point that you just made, Scott, about just that it is the way the game is going, and that we have some young coaches out there, and maybe not all of them young, but that they are playing more of a college or high school type of coaching and the scheme. And because of that, these players who, like Jared Goff, played that air raid system at Cal, like Patrick Mahomes played an air raid system at Texas Tech, it's just that much easier for them to acclimate to these new schemes. And so that to me is one of the things I kind of want to talk about is just, do you feel like it's even more important than ever, the connection between a head coach and his quarterback? And if so, does that mean that basically every new head coach from here on out, or at least the majority of them, are going to be offensive guys?
Well, I think right now, already the majority are offensive-minded head coaches.
Yep.
I think what a good coach does in understanding what his talent level is, and especially the quarterback position, put him in a situation to be successful. And that's what these guys know, and that's what a good coach does.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And you can't you can't force a guy into a system, which I've seen before in the past, and make him try to adjust no matter what to your system. And there are head coaches that have egos that say, "Listen, no, we're running my system. It's my system." I think the relationship between the head coach and the quarterback is huge. It's the most important thing, in my opinion, during the season, between the head coach and the quarterback. Now, the off season, it's the head coach, the general manager, president, whatever, ownership if they're involved. But it's vital, and you got to figure we're looking at a lot of young quarterbacks out there now that are playing really well. I think it's so important to put them in a comfortable situation where they feel, listen, this is what I did in high school. This is what I did in college. I know this stuff. Instead of saying, okay, you're going to be under center, We're going to be dropping back. You can have a 3, 5, 7-step drop, and the ball's got to be out here, here, or here. And that's changed. That's changed. I mean, it's, the game's always changing. They had to run and shoot at one time. Now we got pretty much spread half the teams. But that's what it is. And, the coaches want to have success. The ones that aren't stubborn enough to say it's got to be my system, it's the West Coast, no matter what. They're putting the guys in a situation to be successful, and that's good coaching.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the thing, is that it makes me wonder if we are kind of switching into a new era in the NFL where that we are going to see a lot more interest in some of these college coaches. Lincoln Riley, for example, out in Oklahoma, and just the success that he's had. I mean, is Mike Leach at Washington State. Guys like that are, obviously the success they've had speaks for itself. I'm sure that there have been NFL teams who have, perhaps considered guys like that. But I wonder if we're going to see even more of that than we've seen in the past. Rather than, I've always believed that if you give somebody a second opportunity, then potentially those coaches can be that much more successful. And Bill Belichick, of course, is one of the great examples. Pete Carroll will be another example of head coaches who, were not maybe as successful their first try as NFL head coaches, but then that second time they've learned some things. But I wonder if the need to score points right now, and just the importance of that relationship with the quarterback, as you talked about, Scott, if that is going to force some teams out there to maybe consider some of those college coaches, or maybe even high school coaches, not necessarily as head coaches, but putting them back in. I mean, we saw the way that Mark Trestman, for example, who had all of his experience, or a lot of his experience in the Canadian Football League, how he was brought back in. Do you think we're going to see a lot more of that?
I think so. And as you're well aware, every year there's changes, especially as head coaches in the league. But all these kids are coming out, not kids, but young men are coming out, and they run in high school, they run in college. So you get in the NFL, if you want to be in a situation to have success, keep them comfortable, because it's hard as a young guy in the league. It's very hard. But, it's a thing where you have to score points. That's what it's coming to now. And, the play calling that way, the penalties called or that way, it's amazing. But it is what it is. And you got to keep up with the pace. You have no choice but to. Because, if you're going to go out there and think you're going to shut somebody down, unless you got a really good defense, which, a lot of teams don't, because they're afraid to tackle the quarterback because you're going to get a 15-yard penalty, or you can't touch a guy after 5 yards, which you can't do an arm bar, which is not right, in my opinion. But it is. That's what they're calling. Yep. So I think with like, McVay is a perfect example, because I was with him in Washington. Yeah. And a bright mind that can see how the direction the league's going, and he took Goff from being a bust, supposedly after his first year, which, it takes more than 1 year to be a bust.
Certainly.
But put him in a situation to be highly successful, Now, don't get me wrong, they got good players around them.
Yep.
But that's what a good coach has to do, and that's a new generation of coaches.
No, exactly, and that's you mentioned McVay, and it was one of the things I wanted to mention about that, about McVay and what he's done with the Rams. So I've been watching Cooper Kupp, for years now. I mean, dating back to him in high school. When the Rams lost Cooper Kupp, there was some people out there who kind of believed, okay, this is going to be the first real test for the Rams. And it was one of the things I was most impressed with, is that all that they did is they ended up moving another receiver, Josh Reynolds, up, and he became a starter. And Josh Reynolds, for people who aren't as familiar with him, he's 6'3", he's 200 pounds, he's more of a straight line speed, big play kind of a guy. not the same type of wide receiver as, like, say, Cooper